This podcast is brought to you by Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine for those that love to make and drink great beer. To learn more or to subscribe, visit beerandbrewing.com or find us on social media at Craft Beer Brew. Welcome to the Craft Beer Brewing Podcast. I'm Jamie Bogner, and this week's episode is the last of 3 panel discussions from our recent Brewers Retreat at Dogfish Head in Milton, Rehoboth Beach, and Lewis, Delaware. This one's unusual, extra special. It's moderated by Dogfish Head founder Sam Calagione. I can't remember the last time on the podcast where I handed over the reins like this. But then again, there really aren't that many people like Sam out there in the brewing world who've done it so well for so long and still foster that same sense of wonder, exploration, and excitement in what they do. The panel for this one consists of Dogfish Head product strategy and research brewmaster Mark Safarik, former lead brewer and now R&D brewing manager Bryan Selders, and Ethan Frisch, founder of Burlap Barrel, a distinctive spice purveyor based out of New York City. While you out there listening won't get to taste and experience the spices in the same way those of the event did, this discussion is one of the most in-depth ones I've experienced on spice flavors in the context of brewing. And as you would expect, Sam keeps it extra fun. We'll dive into the panel in a minute, but first, at G&D Chillers, they always strive to build great chillers. Partner with them as you build great beer, but don't just take it from me.
This is Andy Joint of Big Grove Brewery. We've been using G&D chillers from the beginning, and from our original 3.5 barrel pub system up to our production brewery, we've been able to rely on G&D to provide a high quality chiller, help us with design and layout, and provide support whenever we need it.
Choose G&D Chillers on your next expansion or brewery startup and receive 1 free year of remote control and monitoring of your new G&D chiller. And ProBrew is excited to now offer 2 to 4 week lead times on all in-stock ProFill rotary can fillers and seamers. These models are available in 100 to 300 can per minute filling speeds and are built with a focus on scalability and low dissolved oxygen pickup. This special lead time is only while supplies last, so send them an email at contactus@probrew.com or call them at 262-278-4945. ProBrew, brew your beer. Also, you might have heard of Old Orchard, but have you heard of their newest flavors? Berry Blend, Blood Orange, Lemonade, and Tart Cherry are the latest additions to the lineup of flavored craft juice concentrate blends. Old Orchard's R&D team can also formulate custom blends unique to your needs. To learn more and request your free samples, head on over to oldorchard.com/brewer. Now, handing things over to Sam.
Give massive thanks to Burlap Barrel. Both Jake and Ethan are here, but we've been working with Ethan and Ori for over about a decade. How long have you guys been in business?
8 years.
8 years, about pretty much right when they started. We found out about them, and it was kismet, and we've done a lot of beautiful work together. We're going to talk a little bit about that work together through the lenses of the more technical brewers that have worked on these recipes that we've done. But I thought it'd be cool to just kind of hear the origin stories in superhero parlance, first of Burlap Barrel, and then I'll give a little bit about Dogfish and how right early on we got into the world of herbs and spices. So Ethan, tell us about your company to start with.
Yeah, sure. Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much, Sam and Dogfish Head, for having us here. It's always been an honor to work with Dogfish Head, and even more so to be here and participate in this week and to meet all of you and get to talk about spices. I will say my expertise is in spices. It's not in beer, so I'm going to refer any of the more technical questions to my colleagues. But I'm here to talk about spices. We're going to do a sensory tasting later on in this session. We brought a few spices in different categories, so you can start to think about your flavor profiles for this afternoon's brewing session, the upside-down plates on your tables. If you didn't use them for your breakfast already, that's fine if you did. But if you didn't, they're there for starting to blend your spices. So there's spoons in the containers as they make their way around the room. You can kind of scoop some out and start to play with them. I really encourage you to taste and smell the spices on their own. We'll talk a little more about it as we get through to that portion. But first of all, our origin story. My name is Ethan Frisch. I'm the co-founder of Burlap Barrel. We're a single origin spice company. We're a social enterprise, which means we work with small farms in 30 different countries, mostly producers who have never exported before. Let me tell you, the process of bringing wild cumin from Afghanistan into the U.S. from a network of foragers and then finding a way to pack it and sell it was not an easy journey. I mean, Sam, you've talked about your own entrepreneurial path, and There's good times and hard times and easy times. But over the last 8 years, we've built a company that operates at a certain scale. We work with producers all around the world. We bring in about 100 tons of spices a year. Really interesting stuff that you likely have not even tasted before or may not have heard of before. But there are incredible artisan producers who are making these products around the world. And what they often lack is access to a market, right? So they can produce as much Alfonso mango powder, I'm sure, that we're going to try later. But without a market for it, the traditions can fade away, and it's very hard for people to earn a living, especially around traditional ingredients. So that's also what we do is set up these supply chains, support producers who are doing the right thing, from regenerative agriculture to kind of historical and traditional products. My background is half in restaurant kitchens. I was a line cook and a pastry chef in New York and in London, and half in international development. I left kitchens to go to grad school to become an aid worker. I moved to Afghanistan. I had my first home brewing experience in Afghanistan, maybe another story, but it was hard to get beer there, and I bought essentially a kit and carried it into Kabul with me, and had various, there were these like embassy parties, so people would drink champagne. I collected a whole bunch of champagne bottles and brought a corker. Figured that would be anyway, I brewed beer in Kabul because I was kind of desperate. But I also started smuggling back this wild cumin. I mean, I use the word smuggling loosely, but there was an incredible variety of cumin I had never tasted before. I had worked in restaurants in New York. I imagined that there would be a market for this kind of thing. And so I started carrying it home in duffel bags. We built the business out of my one-bedroom apartment in Queens. I had over a ton of spices. Pretty crazy. You'd smell it from the elevator. It was an experience, but I had no money. I had no experience. I was just trying to put this thing together, not dissimilar. And over that period of time, I was traveling a lot. I was meeting a lot of farmers. I was visiting spice farms, learning a lot about spices and the range of flavor profiles from different species of cinnamon to different varieties of black pepper. Just like when you talk about wine grapes or grain or hops. Origin matters, the quality of the soil, the climate, the techniques of the farmer, that all has an impact on flavor. And when you're operating at a high level, as you all are, those ingredients make a big difference. The difference between a commodity pepper and a specialty pepper, something you don't really think about, can have a huge impact on the flavor of the product and the ultimate quality. So I got really into spices, and here we are 8 years later. With Dogfish Head, we supply the black lime that's in the SeaQuench, so that, like such an iconic spice blend, that's kind of a new development. So really exciting for us and a huge honor to be able to do that. And then I think the pumpkin ale this year is our warm spices, which we'll start going through also. Maybe we'll start passing out some of the spices. Yeah,
and by the way, I hope you enjoyed a little breakfast treat there. That's our Palo Santo beer, but served through a Randall that's packed with cocoa nibs and a beautiful coffee that was aged in barrels filled with slivers of sustainably harvested cedar wood from Maine that our friends at Grain Surfboard make the surfboards, and what's left over in the shavings we take, put in a whiskey barrel, age the coffee on it. So a very complex way to have your morning caffeine and alcohol. We hope you enjoy that. But Devin, Sophia, Tom will start bringing around some SeaQuench and pumpkin samples, which, as Ethan said, we make with Burlap Barrel's beautiful spices, and we'll talk about the spices. What we're doing, I think we get an hour up here. I think it'd work really well for 45 minutes while we're talking about stuff up here, and you guys Ethan will lead you through some of what you have on your table. Brian and Mark will talk a little bit about those two beers, but we'll try and leave 10 minutes for Q&A, mostly related about our brew today and using the spices these guys have brought today, because you'll get plenty of time after to talk to Ethan or Jake about anything you want in your own brewing journeys for spices. So we'll focus the Q&A on aligning on our recipes today, if that makes sense. And before I hand it over to Brian and Mark to talk about the samples of beers that you have, a little bit on the Dogfish origin story as it relates to the world of herbs and spices. I mentioned on the tour yesterday that I was 23, 24, home brewing. I knew I wasn't going to be able to build a big brewery, so I knew I had to figure out a unique, concept for a brand for it to stand out as a second generation brewery when there are other great craft breweries that came before us. And so really landing on this concept of committing to be the first brewery to make the majority of our beers outside the Rheinheitsgebot, using culinary ingredients. Sort of three touchstones for me were Michael Jackson, the beer writer from England, who revived, resuscitated a bunch of marginalized styles and kept a lot of the diversity and vibrancy of beer alive. Charlie Papazian, who a lot of us, I'm sure, read The Joy of Homebrewing, just amazing educator and the catalyst that started the American Homebrewing Association and the Brewers Association, a professional side of our community. And Alice Waters is kind of the OG in Northern California, farm to table, evangelist, and people like her and James Beard telling the world, hey, America has an amazing agricultural capability. Let's stop genuflecting to Italy for their cuisine and French for their cuisine. Let's come up with our own great American cuisine traditions. And that's what really inspired me to say, okay, we're going to stop thinking about beer when we open Dogfish as something that comes from 4 ingredients. We're going to look to the whole globe for ingredient inspiration. And away we went, and our original beers were stuff like Chicory Stout, made with organic Mexican coffee, licorice root, and back then St. John's wort. I did not know when we started marketing that you couldn't put St. John's wort in a beer. We marketed it as the world's first antidepressant depressant, so you could drink as much of it and not feel anything but happy, really. And that's how I got introduced to the TTB and what we could and could not say right out of the gates. And we've had lots of fun engagements with them for our different experiments throughout the years. But I'd bring beers like Chicory Stout or Raison d'Etre to early beer festivals in the mid to late 90s, and first generation beer lovers that would go to a beer festival would actually get mad at us or laugh at us. Hey, asshole, you can't put coffee in a stout. You shouldn't put raisins into a Belgian style brown ale. And that's what got me researching ancient brewing traditions. And so then I go to a beer fest and I might have our Chicory Stout on one tab, but next to it I'd have like a medieval gruit or a braggot, and something that had some historical context, so I could remind people, hey, whether or not we know it, we're all kind of thinking of beer through the lens of the Rheinheitsgebot and these 4 ingredients, but essentially the Rheinheitsgebot's nothing more than a relatively modern form of art censorship, because it's a 500-year-old law in a universe where humans have figured out how to make beer 10,000 years ago. And so as we did the research and started working with molecular archaeologists to revive ancient beer styles, based on residue found in tombs in Italy, in Turkey, in Peru, in Egypt, what was common was almost all of them were multi-ferments. So they came with different fermentable sugars in them. Thousands of years ago, different cultures, not connected by Google or the internet, figured out on their own in isolation how to combine different culinary ingredients to make these beautiful beverages that not only were safe to drink, but made them feel closer to their ancestors and each other's. And so that's a tradition we all get to be a part of in this country. And that's really the longest tradition of creative brewing in this country, is just using your own creativity to decide what parts of the bounty of Mother Nature to combine to be awesome fermented beverage recipes, whether you call them beer, beyond beer, or whatever. And so we're really proud that today we started with this mission as the smallest commercial brewery in the country. And today, as a top 25 craft brewery, still the majority of the tanks that you see out here in Milton are filled with beers that have culinary ingredients. So I love the storytelling and the sourcing part of the business, but Brian and Mark are much better technical brewers than me. And it's been one of the best parts of my 30 years in this industry to work with them and work together equally on our creativity, but really lean into their technical prowess to develop these recipes that not only sound exciting with the story of the sourcing of the ingredients and the unexpected combinations, but that the sensory experience of them is as rewarding as the story hopefully is. So handing it over to Mark and Brian to talk a little bit about the two beers you have on the table and anything else they want to say before Ethan walks us through some of the spices that are coming around.
We'll be back with more of the panel discussion in a minute, but first, experience distinct transparency and juiciness with Omega Yeast's Daybreak 5. Using their Lumina technology, Omega genetically eliminated haze in the popular British 5 strain, allowing you to preserve the fruit-boosting prowess while achieving crystal clarity. It's perfect for modern West Coast IPAs. Learn more at info@omegayeast.com. And keep your brewery running smoothly with 5-star chemicals. Their cleaning solutions are specifically formulated to meet the unique needs of breweries, ensuring that your equipment stays clean and free of harmful bacteria and contaminants. From cleaning fermenters to kegs, they've got a solution for every step of the brewing process. Use 5-star chemicals today and taste the difference in your brews. Also, seam defects caused by minimal overlap may not be immediately apparent, but they can become problematic during distribution, leading to leaky pallets. Just because you're not experiencing leaks at your facility doesn't mean you're entirely safe. RSS Macklin offers training to help you understand not only what is happening with your can seams, but also what you can do to fix it. Their comprehensive training ensures that you're equipped to identify and make proper corrective actions before they escalate. Visit them at rssmacklin.com. That's rssmacklin.com. Or email service@rssmacklin.com. Now, back to the world of spice.
Thanks, Sam.
You go.
I go first?
Yeah. You do
nice. So I'm going to talk about pumpkin ale. I have the most experience with pumpkin ale. When I started at Dogfish Head, pumpkin ale was
What year was that, right?
2002. That was prior to it being released in 4-pack bottles at 7% ABV. Rather, it was a 5.5% ABV brown ale made with pumpkin and pumpkin spices. But through that, I mean, the spice blend has remained generally the same. We use beautiful warming spices of allspice, nutmeg, and cinnamon, paired with pumpkin meat into a luscious, mildly sweet, gently toasty brown ale, which is a really delicious combination, which elicits feelings of having some pie crust without the butter, of course, as well as some gentle fruitiness from the pumpkin, and then just that comfortable feeling of having those warming spices. Through the years, as we've been working with Burlap and Barrel, it was an absolute blessing to have found them and start incorporating their warm spices into to pumpkin ale. Not only for how absolutely delicious those spices are, as they're fresh and luscious, but also the good things that purchasing those spices in quantity for our beer does for the farmers that Burlap and Barrel impacts by sourcing those spices through them. So I mean, it really helps us live the lessons we preach by doing good things for communities, not only locally but also globally with the beers that we brew.
And maybe before Mark talks about SeaQuench, to Brian's point, Ethan, can you talk about being a public benefit corporation, what that means? Some of us are probably familiar with organizations like 1% for the Planet, or being a B corporation. So maybe tell us about this platform and why it's important to you guys.
Sure, yeah. Thanks, that's a great question. We are incorporated in the state of Delaware, not surprisingly, as a public benefit corporation. It's a new style of corporation that incorporates, no pun intended, a public benefit element. So written into our articles of incorporation, there's a legal obligation to act on our public benefit, which is to connect smallholder farmers to high value markets. So kind of a new, I think in the last 5 years, something that was important to me from my background as an aid worker. I was involved in projects that were spending, over $100 million on infrastructure in Afghanistan, northern Afghanistan. And through that process, I realized that maybe the money would have been better spent just going house to house and handing people a stack of cash and letting people make their own decisions, rather than having someone come in from the outside and say, this is how that money needs to be spent. easier said than done, but what that led me to was, what if we can buy products from local producers, where then they're just making the money that they need or they want to then decide how they kind of take care of their families and expand their livelihoods.
And you guys, when you buy, I think there's a fact in your, you can see on your website, when your retail pricing for what you make is 2 to 10 times more than the commodified version of that spice. Similar to us as craft brewers, whether we're pros or home brewers, the cost associated with sourcing and making world-class small batch beer is not at commodity pricing, and we deal with that in the marketplace every day. So I guess part of that, what you guys have to do is convince people that the quality is as important as the story of the source of the farm compared to the commodified versions.
Yeah, I mean, I see the faces that you all are making now just to speak to the quality. I mean, I love it, right? Like the intensity of these ingredients speaks for itself, and I think that's the point, is that we're not buying commodity products at an elevated price. We're buying exceptional products that have simply not found a market for them in the past because of supply chain issues, or now it's so easy to communicate with somebody in Vietnam to coordinate a shipment of a specialty spice at a small quantity. Really wouldn't have been feasible 10 or 15 years ago. It's pretty easy today, and so we've been able to use that access. But all of the farmers we work with are operating at a very high level. They grow with a lot of intention. These are, you're a technical crowd, right? These are technical farmers who, over years, or in many cases generations, have honed a very specific way to produce an ingredient to develop certain flavors. And the ingredients that you're tasting in front of you, they're not just commodity versions of certain spices. They're rare and specialty, and across the board, the spices that we carry are different from what you find on the commodity market.
So, Mark, maybe talk a little bit about SeaQuench and any other, experimental beers that we've done recently with Burlap Barrel that you're particularly excited about.
Okay. So SeaQuench Ale, we did this project. That's kind of the first one I did when I started working with you on beers. And essentially the goal was to combine three of them to make the most refreshing beer in the world. I can't legally say that. We had to say objectively formulated to be considered the most refreshing beer in the world, produced in Delaware. Yeah, something like that. But essentially, it's three styles, and we still continue to brew it this day. It's a Kolsch, a Berliner Weiss, and a Goza, and they're brewed in a sequence. And we still do that to this day. We do three brews that are all different. And the black lime is sort of the hero ingredient of that, and this, I think, is a really good example of where sort of spices and herbs can be used in places where you don't necessarily expect them, like beers like pumpkin ales and things like that. It's kind of a place where spices go, but to use them in sort of a refreshing beach beer is kind of sort of not really normal. And so what we like about the black lime is it brings this sort of pretty tart lemon lime and a little bit of a floral and herbal note to it. That's really sort of we try to weave it sort of harmoniously into the beer, so it's not sort of beating you over the head, but it really marries well with all the things. The black limes were something that we really had a lot of trouble sourcing because it's not a common ingredient. And when Burlap and Barrel started carrying them, we immediately jumped on that. So we imported a whole mess load of black limes. And you'll see some of those in their whole form. They look like black ping pong balls, but they're you got to bust one open. They're really amazing smell. And then I think once you do that, you'll be able to sort of pick it out in the SeaQuench. But the whole goal with this beer was to make it refreshing. So in addition to the black limes, we've got a salt package in there that was developed by some people that used to work at the Gatorade Institute, and it's sort of formulated in a way that has that perfect balance of electrolytes. So if you're, coming in from last night and maybe you've over-imbibed a little, you can rehydrate yourself a little bit. Little hair of the dog there too as well. But the idea is to really make that really refreshing beer have this really interesting sort of lime floral note, and that's it. Enjoy.
Well, can I take that segue to start talking about the black lime?
Yeah. Sure. Let's do that. Because the black lime is one of the things out on the table, Ethan.
Okay. So hopefully most people have had a chance to try most of the spices at this point and collect little samples. We brought spices in three categories today. So the first category is sour spices. That's the black lime. That's the amchur, the Alfonso mango amchur, and the cured sumac. Has everybody had a chance to try those three? All right, so I'll just run through the whole list and then I'll come back to them. Then we brought probably a half dozen spices in the sweet or warm sweet category. That's 2 different varieties or maybe even 3 different varieties of cinnamon. That's cardamom in 2 forms, the whole pods and the seeds. That's the split vanilla pods, the Nyanza vanilla pods. That's the Grenada Gold nutmeg. What else is in that category? I think that's everything. And then we brought 3, and a buffalo ginger as well. And then we brought 3 spices in the savory category. That's the wild mountain cumin from Afghanistan. That's the black urfa chili and the wild Timor pepper. Has everybody had a chance to try most of the spices I listed? Not quite yet. They'll keep working their way around. I'm going to start talking through them. I'll do sour first and then sweet and then savory, just to give you a sense of the individual kind of backstories and profiles. Black lime used in the SeaQuench ale. These are whole dried limes. They're dried in the sun. You could do this on your windowsill at home. But there's an oxidation process that happens through that drying, so the lime turns black. These are done in a big field out in the sun. They're dried in the sun and then tied up in like a plastic bag where the condensation can come together so they sort of rehydrate. I don't really understand the process, but this is done in Guatemala. The limes turn a jet black, this really beautiful black color, and they develop some of those other flavors that Mark was talking about. There's a little bit of a savory profile, a leathery profile, tobacco, but a beautiful sour ingredient. You can use it in cooking any way that you would use lemon or lime juice, and that's true for all 3 of these spices. A way to add some acidity into a recipe without liquid. But the black lime, a really cool one. The second one is the Alfonso mango amchur. This is a traditional Indian ingredient used in chats and salads, a super tangy powder made from salted and dried green mangoes. These are often the byproduct during the mango harvesting process. Green mangoes that fall off the tree or aren't quite right at the time that they're harvesting get picked. They get grated and packed with salt and then dried in the sun and ground up. So it's a mango powder. With this incredible salty and sour profile. We use Alfonso mangoes, known as the king of mango, and it has a lot of floral qualities in that mango in particular, and so you get this sort of extra element above the tanginess and the saltiness. And then the third in that category is the cured sumac. Sumac is a classic Middle Eastern ingredient. It also grows around here, all throughout the Northeast, different species, but it's a little red berry. It looks kind of like a fuzzy red lentil with a seed in the center. It has malic acid in it, a unique souring agent, one that's kind of hard to find in citrus or other vinegar, other kind of traditional sources of acidity, and it's really tangy. This is a wild Turkish sumac. Often the sumac that you buy at the store, if you've tried it before, it's kind of a dusty red powder. The berries have been dried. These berries, instead of being dried, are cured. So packed with a little salt and then ground in a big spinning stone grinder. This is an ancient process. These come from the Turkish-Syrian border, the cradle of civilization. People have been using sumac in this way for a very, very long time. I mean, to talk about ancient traditions. So
on that, Ethan, speaking of ancient traditions, the world's probably foremost sour beer brewery, Rodenbach. So we were very proud to be the first brewery in whatever their 500-year history to do a collaboration with them. And as Rudy was touring me, Mariah, Sammy, and Mark through their foeder halls, we went outside and there was a sumac tree at Rodenbach. And if you guys ever had our Crimson Crew, maybe describe, Mark, for a second, how we incorporate sumac into that beer, the different threads. That beer was a blend of Grand Cru, which they tankered over from Belgium, and then we brewed a red ale with sumac in it. We had basically those grow here. You can see sumac on the side of the road and stuff like that. And then we did. There's an elder tree also in Rodenbach, and so we did the vibrant potion with them with elderflower and elderberry, and then as the homage to the Delaware, where we had the sumac. We used to have sumac trees that lined the walk up to the packaging hall there, but we incorporated those 2 beers together into a red ale and used the sumac to drive and complement the tartness of the Grand Cru. So,
So that's the sumac. You could use it culinarily. You'd use it in grilling. You'd use it in salads. Great as a finishing ingredient, but also as a source of acidity through a cooking process. Chicken stews and things like that. And any questions about those three? We'll have more time for a Q&A at the end, and we'll have a lot more time to talk at the Spice Bazaar later. But any questions on those three spices in particular? I'll move on to the warming spices. Yeah, go ahead.
Curious on how you see this brewing process in the boil. Seems like a lot of people see more of the.
This is not my question.
There are a number of places you can use them. We often use them in the whirlpool. However, they can be added post-fermentation. The impact you get from those different usages clearly is going to be quite a bit different, simply because of the forces to which you're exposing the spices and herbs and flavorings to. So, I mean, just like how you use hops, what you get out of them changes dramatically depending on point of use.
Yeah, the Allagash collab that we did, all the spices. It's the buffalo ginger, the cinnamon verum quills, and black urfa chilies. Those were all cold side adds. We did a cold steep with those. You get a much, like to Brian's point, you get a much different flavor impact than if you were to put them on the hot side and get that hot boiling extraction.
Are we taking the time to sterilize them and heat them before we use them if we use them on the cold side, or is the alcohol that's already present enough to not worry about that?
We took the alcohol was enough, but yeah.
we have a robust food safety program where we make sure that everything you're getting is ready to eat.
It's pretty impressive, though, when you use them in the hot side. The volatilization of essential oils and stuff isn't quite as massive as you think it would be, and the carryover of flavor through that exposure through fermentation and into the finished beers is really quite nice. It's good. And then also, since you're cooking them, the flavors get incorporated a little bit better, and you're not just faced with the raw spice flavor that you're experiencing now. There's some chemical reactions that occur in the hot side that really help the flavors meld with the wort and make it more incorporated into the flavor without it being kind of like the standout aroma of, there's buffalo ginger in this. It all depends on the flavor goals that you're after, and that'll determine the point of use that is appropriate for that circumstance.
I'll run through the warming spices now. There are two different species of cinnamon. Anybody know how cinnamon grows? What a cinnamon plant looks like? No? Nobody? Really? Guesses? It's tree bark. It's the only tree bark that humans eat. There are 4 different species of cinnamon, roughly correlated with different countries: an Indonesian species, a Chinese-Vietnamese species, a historical Vietnamese species, which is the royal cinnamon that's going around, and then a Sri Lankan and Southern Indian species, which is called cinnamon verum, the Latin name. There's sometimes this idea that there is a true cinnamon and then not true cinnamons. It's all sort of a misnomer based on the Latin name verum, which was given to one variety of cinnamon. They're all genus Cinnamomum, and then very different flavor profiles across the different species. So the two that are going around, one is cinnamon verum. That's the Sri Lankan and Southern Indian species. We get it from Zanzibar, an island in the Indian Ocean off the east coast of Africa. It's a little more savory, a little more citrusy, a little more herbal. The flavor of this cinnamon really comes out with some heat. It's the lighter colored of the two cinnamons. And then the other one is royal cinnamon. This is a historically Vietnamese cinnamon. The idea of Saigon cinnamon, also a little bit of a misnomer. There's no cinnamon grown anywhere near Saigon, which is in southern Vietnam. All the cinnamon is grown in the center and the north of the country, but was traded through Saigon. But this is the cinnamon that made Vietnamese cinnamon kind of on the world stage. It's now been mostly replaced by another cinnamon species called cassia. But this species, super sweet, super spicy. The oils are incredibly concentrated, and cinnamon being tree bark, the older the tree, the more intense the flavor. So this powder that you have in front of you is from bark that would have been, a centimeter thick at least. This really heavy bark, trees that are 15 to 20 years old, where the oils have concentrated over a long period of time, and is kind of best used in the powder format because the bark itself is so heavy and dense. You can't really break it up. It's hard to grind at home. And so the powder works really well for that. Taste a little bit on your tongue. The sweetness is kind of surprising. Those are the two cinnamons, yes?
Does it regrow
Cinnamon trees, two different species are harvested in different ways. So the verum, they're harvesting individual branches, and they can use a technique called coppicing to encourage growth from the same stump, so it doesn't kill the tree. The royal, the trees are cut down. But it's an agricultural process. It's a cycle. It just happens over 20 to 25 years instead of seasonally. But families are planting trees. Parents are planting trees that their kids are going to harvest. We met a farmer in Vietnam who had just gifted. She walked us around a plot. I mean, it looks like a forest, but it's a farm. And she had just gifted that plot to her daughter as a wedding present, right? Like this was an investment. She had planted these trees, and it the investment grew literally over time. So it just operates on a longer cycle. The other thing that's going around is the cinnamon tree leaves. These are used a lot in Indian cooking, sometimes called an Indian bay leaf, but it's the leaf of the cinnamon tree. It's a byproduct of the harvesting process. You can use it like a bay leaf, so it would go into presumably the boil, but it's great in a pot of rice or a chicken stew. It adds that kind of herbal green character as well as the sort of warm cinnamon spice character. There's two types of cardamom going around. There's cardamom seeds and cardamom pods. Cardamom is related to ginger and turmeric, so you get some of those ginger notes in cardamom. Each pod comes from a single flower, and then the seeds that are going around are the seeds that have been removed from the pod. Cardamom historically is an Indian ingredient. We get it from Guatemala. It grows under the canopy in a cloud forest, which is why we call it cloud forest cardamom. We work with an incredible farmer. He's been doing this a long time. He has the only vertically integrated cardamom company in Guatemala, which sounds like kind of a crazy claim, but in an industry that's dominated by these legacy family businesses, he has made a name for himself as an entrepreneur. He owns a farm, he owns a drying facility, and he does his own export. He's the only person to do that in a crowded market. So a really impressive guy, an intense guy. He's indigenous. He started by following the trucks, working on other people's farms. They knew they were selling cardamom pods to truck drivers, and he started following the trucks to see where those trucks were going, and over the years has pieced together his own company. The cardamom that's going around is a vine-ripened cardamom. A lot of spices are graded by color, by aesthetics, not by flavor. This is a legacy of a really outdated system of understanding quality when it comes to spices, but cardamom in particular. So the cardamom pods that are going around, a lot of them are split. They're a little yellow in color. In the classic grading system, that would be considered lower quality, but the first time I went to visit, we tasted all these pods kind of one by one, and these really stood out to me. The vine ripening process develops a lot of flavor. You get sweetness, you get spiciness, you get floral qualities, citrusy qualities. That in the other cardamom, where green is the valuable quality you're selling based on how green it is, so farmers are picking it a little underripe while it's still very green and not letting it ripen on the vine. So that's the cardamom pods. I really encourage you to pop open a pod or two and put the little cluster. Hopefully you get a good pod, but the good pods will have a really tight cluster of dark seeds, a little bit glossy, with a little bit of a white fruit kind of membrane around the seeds. These are tiny little clusters. Just pop it in your mouth and let it sit on your tongue. You'll taste the sweetness of the fruit before you bite into the seeds, which then have a minty, gingery, kind of green quality that's really just a very versatile ingredient. Works well in savory, works well in sweet. Kind of a more intense version of ginger, if you want to think about it that way, without the spiciness that you get from ginger. A cool ingredient. And then the seeds that are going around, just a different format, a little bit easier to work with. The oils in cardamom are concentrated about 90% in the seeds, about 10% in the pods. So the pods add a little bit of earthiness, and then a little extra oil. But if you're looking for a super clean, kind of minty, gingery cardamom flavor, the seeds are probably the way to go. Similarly, the vanilla pods, the Nyanza vanilla pods that are going around, those are vine-ripened pods. They're kind of scraggly. They're split. They don't look, glossy and beautiful the way a vanilla pod classically does. But these are the better pods. Same idea as the cardamom. They ripen on the vine. They split on the vine. The sugars develop. Vanilla is an orchid. Each pod comes from a single flower. Those flowers have to be hand-pollinated. They open for 3 hours. It's almost a joke, right? Like how extreme this process is. But the flower opens for 3 hours once a year. The farmer has to go in with a toothpick and self-pollinate it. And then 6 to 9 months later, you have a pod. They look like little green bananas on a vine. And then the pods themselves are blanched in hot water, heated and cooled, dried in the sun, often individually hand massaged. One of the reasons vanilla is so expensive, it takes a lot of work to develop those flavors. But in my opinion, the split pods are absolutely the way to go. And you also get the surface area exposure of the inner seeds. So in an infusion process or brewing process, you get a lot more coverage that way. We also do a lot of work with vanilla powders, where we take these exact pods that are going around and we grind them up into a powder, which works beautifully in baking, on oatmeal. I don't know. I mean, it would. I'm not a beer expert, but you would get little flecks of vanilla. So maybe a cool effect. And then there's also nutmeg going around. Nutmeg, another crazy ingredient, historically only grew on these tiny little islands in the South Pacific. Each individual nutmeg is the seed, the pit of a little stone fruit, looks like a little peach or an apricot. It has a glossy black shell around it. And then mace, another spice you may have heard of, is a bright red kind of fingery coating. They look like dinosaur eggs or something. They have this almost alien quality. The fruit's split open. You have this little red and black egg sticking out of it. And those flavors are really intense. Nutmeg is also a narcotic, just to speak to the intensity of those oils, especially in a fresh nutmeg like is going around. I busted up a couple of them in the container just so you could smell them. But if you took a whole nutmeg, you can kind of break it under maybe an unopened beer can or something to open it up and expose the oils. An incredible ingredient. There's also ginger going around, buffalo ginger. You've probably tasted ginger before. This is a Vietnamese variety with a really thick skin and an extra spicy flavor. I get a lot of pineapple from this ginger. It's also ground up with the skin still on it. Often ginger is peeled, so you get extra kind of earthiness, spiciness, intensity from the inclusion of the peel. What else? Oh, smoked star anise from Vietnam. Star anise, an incredible. It's a seed pod. It's a fruit, so they're green on the tree. They grow on trees. We get 2 harvests a year. There's a summer harvest and a winter harvest. The winter harvest is the one that we carry, my favorite. It's cold and wet. They can't dry the pods in the sun. They're a little smaller, a little fruitier, very tart. If you're up for it and you have a star anise pod in front of you, I really recommend just biting down on one of those petals of the star. It's truly one of the most intense single ingredients I've ever tasted. You get sweetness, you get tartness, you get the anise flavor, plus you get the smokiness from this being a winter harvest. They can't dry in the sun, and so they dry it over a low coal fire. A really incredible product. We've worked with a producer, 2 cousins, 2 women in northern Vietnam for quite a few years now to source this specific ingredient. Any other sweet ingredients that I forgot?
We're going to try a couple of the sugars tonight.
Yeah.
Brian will talk about those beers. But if you go visit Burlap Barrel's website, one of my favorite things that you guys should sell as a poster is whoever the artist that did the entire earth flattened out, and the illustrations of where your ingredients come from literally around the world. And one of the more exotic ones you did that we got to play around with in a fun way was your kelp that was harvested off the coast of Iceland, and we did a fun collaboration with a brewery, Oxbow, up in Maine. They're big music fans. We're big music fans, and we used honeys from Delaware and honeys from Maine for a beer called Kelp, I Need Some Honey. And we were really proud of the way that turned out. But that's one of the more exotic locales of one of your ingredients. Can you name one that's maybe on the horizon? I might be leading the witness here because we're going to segue into talking about some of your sugars. So maybe.
Oh, yeah, sure.
More in a sec, but first, Indie Hops breeds new hop varieties to help brewers captivate beer lovers. Brewers worldwide trust Indie's unique varieties, Strata, Lorien, Luminosa, Meridian, and Audacia, to modernize, brighten, and diversify their beer lineup. Indie also offers classics that thrive in Oregon terroir, such as Chinook, Crystal, and Sterling, thoughtfully crafted and selected hops to meet your brewing needs. Visit indiehops.com/podcast to discover what's new in hop flavors. Indie Hops, life is short. Let's make it flavorful. And Berkeley Yeast, founded by bioengineers, yeast that's designed to improve flavor, quality, and consistency, increase efficiency, and save you money. If you've been following yeast, I'm sure you've heard about their strains. Super Bloom strains make classic hops flavors. Fresh strains keep diacetyl low even with large hop additions. Tropic strains make a tropical bouquet reminiscent of the finest Southern Hemisphere hops. And they just dropped new strains that are even more futuristic. Nationwide free shipping. Mention this podcast for 20% off of your first order. Now, let's get spicy again.
The last year or so, we've been working on single origin sugars. Is that where you want me to go with this? All right, got it. Cool. There's a whole category in salt, specialty salts, sea salts that's developed over the last 10 or 15 years, but no equivalent in sugar. Maybe you as brewers have a better sense of sugar as a category than the general public does, and certainly better than I did. But sugar is also an ancient ingredient. The modern version, white sugar, is essentially a chemical. It can't be considered non-GMO because there's no organic material left in it. It's been fully refined. It's filtered through animal bones. It's a dirty product and a bad history. And so, yeah, seriously, that's white sugar. I mean, this is a product that spans human history and has a lot of trauma and tragedy associated with it, from the transatlantic slave trade to diabetes and diet-related illnesses. Sugar as an industry has had a huge impact on our day-to-day lives in ways that I think I certainly didn't realize until I started kind of following this project. So in response to that, I don't know, what do we do? We're a spice company. Here's a huge global problem. Let's see what we can, let's throw some product at the wall and see what happens. So we launched a series of single origin sugars. We have 3 or 4 out now. We have another one coming out soon. These are, like our spices, historically significant cultural ingredients that have been produced in certain ways for a long time, that are unrefined, that are minimally processed. We have 3 cane sugars here today, I think, are making their way around the room. One is a turbinado-style sugar from Barbados. Talk about a traumatic history. Barbados was the first slave colony in the U.S. to produce cane sugar in this way under the most horrific conditions you can imagine, and now is the final Caribbean island producing this ingredient. We really wrestled with this. We went to Barbados and talked to a lot of people there about their thoughts on this ingredient and the product behind it. And the consensus, ultimately, the decision that we made was that to preserve this, to be able to talk about this history was really important, to not let this product disappear, which it really is at risk of because of pressures of the commodity market. There's no demand for it. So we're trying to build a market for that. There's also a panela. This is a sugar grown at high altitudes in the mountains of Colombia, also a DOP, a protected origin designation by the Colombian government, an unrefined sugar that has this crazy process of buckets of sugar being thrown, literally tossed in the air. This 1,000 degrees or something, this lava that these guys are tossing through the air with buckets at the end of a pole as a way to aerate it and granulate it. So you get a really interesting texture. I don't know how that works out in beer, but and a particular flavor. They're using heirloom cane varieties. And then the third one going around is a jaggery. This is probably the oldest style of granulated sugar in the world from India. The sugar is boiled, so cane is pressed and juiced. The juice is boiled in cast iron pots, so the iron has some kind of chemical effect on it. Dried in cakes and then stone ground. So likewise, an amazing texture, a really buttery flavor. This is a farmer in particular, someone we've worked with for a long time, an individual. He's an Ayurvedic pharmacologist who became a turmeric farmer, primarily seeing the same kind of diet-related illnesses in his patients over and over. Decided to put himself further back in the supply chain and start growing ingredients. I don't have any turmeric with us today, but an incredible product in its own right. But his jaggery is really special. He had never exported before. We've done all this legwork to set that up for export. And then the 2 that are going to wind up in the beer, one is our smoked maple sugar. I don't have a single sample of it, but I'm sorry, not smoked, wood-fired maple sugar. Comes from a husband and wife operation in Vermont's Hidden Kingdom. The wife in particular figured out a way to granulate dark maple syrup. If you're a maple syrup connoisseur, you've tasted, there's a range of colors from light to dark. If you know what you're talking about, the dark is the best. It has the most kind of what you would call impurities, but really add to that flavor and color. But for some reason, chemically, it's very difficult to granulate. And she figured out a way to do it. So we have a granulated sugar. They cook the syrup down over a wood fire, thus the name. And then, so that's in the ESB, I think. And then the fourth one, we've also launched a line of honeys with Dr. Jane Goodall, another story I'm happy to talk about later. But we get a smoked honey. This is a wild honey from Tanzania. This is the area of Western Tanzania, really Central Africa, the Miombo woodlands, a huge area of land.
Bluetooth disconnected. Bluetooth pairing.
Huge area of land, pristine forest. These are wild managed hives, so local communities will keep an eye on these hives. They're high up in the trees. They harvest the honey a couple of times a year. It's a sustainable source of income for them. It prevents deforestation, protects one of the last wild chimpanzee habitats in the world, and maybe not surprisingly, bees like smoke. The smoking calms the bees, and so as a way to harvest more sustainably without damaging the hives, the bees all kind of go to sleep, and you harvest the honey. But smoked honey, like I mentioned in vanilla and cardamom, is considered a defect. There's no market for smoked honey, but it's an incredible flavor. It's basically halfway to barbecue sauce. So we can pass some of those around. Jake, go ahead and pass those around. You could, I don't know how you're going to taste them. Pour a little out on your plate or something, or at least smell it. I don't know. Anyway, that wound up in the ESB also with the smoky flavor. It's a blend of about 30 different flowers from the Miombo woodlands, mostly the Miombo tree itself, but all kinds of Central African woodland flowers. So a really interesting flavor profile, very acidic, very kind of caramelly or molassesy, and then having this smoke character on top of that because of the process, really special.
And actually, one little spoiler: we're already talking to Ethan to get in touch with Jingle and see if we can do a smoked honey whiskey. Our distiller Darren's excited about that, and we're already getting that ball rolling. But those of you that came to the brew pub 2 nights ago and tried our sort of naked ESB, tonight you guys are in for a treat. Maybe Brian to talk about what you and Jake concocted there.
Sure. So some of you may have met Jake last night. He's the head brewer at a Rehoboth Beach brew pub, and he was hopefully giving some tours. I don't know if that happened.
Yeah, you don't have to fire him. He did a good job last night.
Oh, thank God. He's a good kid. We should keep him. Anyway, so we have the ESB down there, which is made from just Maris Otter, some crystal malt, torrefied wheat, East Kent Goldings, with a beautifully fruity, expressive English ale yeast. Half of that went into firkins. The rest of it was filtered and put into a serving tank. 2 of the firkins were prepared with these 2 beautiful sugars that Ethan just talked about. One of them was primed with the wood-fired maple sugar, and the other was primed with Dr. Jane Goodall's special recipe smoked honey. Is that what it's called? Yeah. With the smoked honey. So as the welcome beer for tonight's dinner, you'll be served a half pint of each of those, so you can see the difference in flavor impression that you get from each of those 2 sugars. Very exciting.
Nice. And I know for sake of time, we might go to just some questions on what's in front of you, mostly through the lens of thinking about today's recipe. And Brian and Mark, on the base recipe, do you guys want to talk a minute for that before we talk about the herb choices? And then you guys are going to go forage in our building as well, and we can talk about that as well.
Sure. So as you may have heard, you're brewing a red ale. However, my ask is that you take a look at these specifications and with your brewing Sherpas, work together to develop a recipe to meet these specifications. And once you've all knocked out into your fermenters, we're going to send them to the lab and then judge you upon how well you met these specifications. So we're aiming for 16.25 Plato. Our RDF is 62, leaving us at 6.5% ABV. You're shooting for 25 IBUs. You'll probably see about 35 to 40 in your wort, so that's what we'll be looking for. But just shoot for 25 IBUs. And then your color is 34 SRM. There's a whole variety of different colored malts downstairs waiting for you to pick and choose from to develop your recipes. So when you think red ale, we're talking about color. We're not talking about I don't know.
Saffron. Talking about mid roast grains, right?
Right. So,
Crystals.
we're not talking about mid-90s microbrewery fare. We're talking about doing something that's really, you can make that, and I would. It's delicious. But you can do whatever you want just as long as you meet these specifications. You've got Cara Red, you've got some Carafa 3, you've got a bunch of different crystal malts, including Red Rye Crystal. So, if there's something down there that you don't see and you might want to use it, we'll take a look. If we have it, we'll grab it for you. We'll do whatever you want, just as long as you make something interesting, thoughtful, and delicious. And that's all we really care about. And you can explore the opportunities that you have and all the options that you have with your amazing brewing Sherpas, who are leaders of our industry and will certainly guide you to the greatest level of success.
And why did we choose this base recipe as a blank canvas this for all the beautiful herbs and spices and fruits from Burlap and Barrel?
That's a good question, Sam. So I'm going to hand out these packets to you guys in a little bit. And I made a recipe about 2 weeks ago, and this is how I would have solved for this problem 2 weeks ago. And I probably would do it differently today. But whatever. The key here is that we're making a beer that has a nice round malt base that has all sorts of different sensations to support the spiciness. So you've got some breadiness, some toffiness, a little bit of toasty roastiness, and all of that just supports all sorts of different warm spices, sweet spices. Even your sour spices will shine in this. You know, when I made this recipe, I planned to hop it with a blend of Adina and Cascade hops. So with the Adina being somewhat herbal, spicy, and earthy, and the Cascade bringing some bright citrus into the beer. And upon that, we can take all sorts of different stuff from this amazing selection of spices and build a flavor that is really awesome. I mean, there's so much awesome flavor to explore in any style of beer, and I think that this type of beer with some colored malts and whatnot is a really great place to start to really enjoy the possibilities of what beer has been and can be in the future.
Whoa, nice. Mark, anything to add on the recipe?
I can't top that.
Whoa, no, none of us can. That was nice. Is there still time to get a third presidential candidate onto the platform? Brian, and plenty for president, Brian for president.
I'm here for the beer party.
So let's do it. We may be running a few minutes behind. I don't see Kim giving me the stink eye yet, or Jamie, but just to if there are, like, at your tables, like, big questions on thinking about today's brew now that Brian talked about the base recipe, what you have in front of you for Ethan or for the brewers here as you guys concoct your recipes. Let's keep the questions about that for maybe 5 minutes. Go ahead.
Regarding the application of putting spices into your beers, do you find that crushing it all is more efficient, or do you find sometimes using a whole pod of something in the infusion is better as far as utilization of it in your final product?
I prefer to grind them. Just you expose all those oils. It's more surface area. A lot of these they're tend to be seeds and things like that. The flavor's locked inside that. So you really want to open it up in some way. You don't have to completely powderize it, but you definitely want to open them up.
One of the critical things that you need to remember, though, is that if you try to dump those raw spices into your kettle, they're just going to blow off with the vapors boiling off. So you definitely want to hydrate them in some cold water prior to adding them to the kettle. And because you want cold water, so you don't volatilize any essential oils prior to putting it into the beer, so you get everything out of them.
So you make like a cold steep tea, and then
Just a slurry,
Yeah,
just
slurry,
a slurry that you can like slurp into your wort.
I don't know that slurp's an adjective in that context.
That's actually a verb.
Oh, I bet
Don't you have
it
an
is. For
English
you it
degree?
is. Okay, go. What else? Other good questions. What else?
Yeah.
Is there a concern, like using some of these spices are sort of oily, if you use them on the cold side, is that going to, affect your foam?
I've never experienced that. I mean, it's there's oils there, but they're not. It's not like putting olive oil into it or something like that. You're not going to get a slick on top or anything like that. I've never found an issue with that.
What was the ingredient we used in Rehoboth where we had to lay it out with paper towels to get the oil out?
That
of
was
it?
olives.
Olives. Okay.
Yeah.
So sometimes that happens.
That was like a pizza beer or something.
Probably your idea.
No, that was definitely not my idea.
What else about the ingredients in front of us and the challenge for today's brew?
There,
That goes in the whirlpool. We have we use whole black lime that we buy, and then we have a contraption down under the brew house called Busta Limes, and it's an old apple mill, and so we use that to sort of break it up. We don't completely powderize it, but yeah, that's.
There are also 3 more ingredients circulating. The black Urfa chili, that's a cured chili from Turkey that was used in the Gathering of the Imps beer. with kind of chocolatey, raisiny coffee notes through the curing process. There's a Timor pepper. It's a relative of a Sichuan pepper from the Himalayas, from Nepal. So you'll get a little bit of that tingly. I find it to be less tingly than a Sichuan pepper, but with a lot of really beautiful citrus, particularly grapefruit notes. It's a little hoppy, also a little weedy. It has this kind of dankness that's really nice. And then the third one is the Wild Mountain Cumin that we brought, because it also has this kind of piney, kind of high note that you often don't find with cumin. It's a different species than anybody else imports into the U.S., a smaller seed, a darker seed, with just sort of a more complex flavor that I thought you might appreciate.
Those are all really, sorry. Those are all really awesome ingredients, and I've used the black Urfa at great length and in combination with the wild Timor peppers. But if you're looking for a beer to taste wild Timor pepper in, tonight at the brew pub, if you have an opportunity to taste the Namaste that's on tap down there, it includes...
Namaste here too.
Oh, it also is in the Namaste here too. It's amazing. We did the same thing at the same time.
How about it?
Collaboration, people. That's the theme tonight of the whole week. I do want to say, we're about to go on a little. I don't know if Jamie or Kim want to talk about the next part of our mission for a moment, but I do want to say, when I got to intro you, or just welcome everyone the first night we were together at Brewings and Eats, I said one of the things I was most excited about was, how much work went into this, from the folks that got to host this in the past and did an amazing job, to Jamie, John, the whole team, how many hours went in it. And I said I'm most excited to let you guys see all of our facilities, enjoy what we make, but also meet the people that make Dogfish Head come to life. You see Tom working the Randall like a DJ over there, and Devin and Kim, but also thinking about the one of my great memories of yesterday, or a couple, would just be watching the interaction, collaboration out on the floor, and how amazing this community is, and how much we're willing to share ideas with each other, both those pros and hobbyists, and that's been a big component of this community since its inception. A highlight for me was talking with Avery and Pat about they're starting their brewery in Santa Fe, right? And how Doug from Burial, when their tanks got screwed up, helped them figure out how to get those welded. The next part of the conversation was they're not sure about what to do for the food side of the business. They're talking to Jason Perkins from Allagash. He's like, I'll get you in touch with our hospitality people to tell you how we work on the food truck side of the business. And there's just so much good karma in this work that we're doing together, this fun work that we're doing together to help each other keep this industry vibrant. Yes, right now craft beer is not maybe growing in America. The hobby of homebrewing right now is not growing in America, but it's up to us as a community to keep this exciting for the next generation to help it grow again. I want to thank Beer and Brewing for being an awesome catalyst to put this together and let us do this work together. And maybe, Jamie, take the mic and tell us what we're supposed to do next.
Why don't you tell them, Sam? All right. Well, Ethan and the Burlap and Ethan and Jake have set up a spice bazaar.
This was Sam's idea.
This was Sam's idea. We should say, and Mark and Brian can speak to this, Sam has spent a lot of energy thinking about this, concepting and wrangling the Dogfish team and the Burlap and Barrel folks to create this spice bazaar, to create the ultimate dogfishy experience here at the brewery. So you can shop spices. We're going to break out in two waves. The first wave will be Avery and Henry and Jason and Chris's groups. They'll go do the first wave of shopping. You can go up there, shop the brew house, shop for spices, start working as a group together to come up with your blend of spices. While they're doing that, the other three groups will hang out here, gather together as groups, start talking about other elements. Also, you have some creative inspiration on your plates in front of you, and that'll help you get to where you are going to go as a group. And then we'll switch out, and the other groups will go shopping in the spice bar. You've got stuff for everybody there too.
Yeah. Well, actually, Jake, we can leave the containers here so you all can continue to smell and taste them while we take smaller groups over to the bazaar. These containers are for all of you for the afternoon. So either snag the whole container or take out some of the ingredients to bring down to the brewing later. And then we brought enough jars for everybody to pick 2 or 3 to take home. We don't have the full lineup of things that you tasted today, but probably about a half dozen of them. We have them set up in the brew pub. So shopping, we have these nice gift bags. You get to pick a couple of jars, 3 jars to take home with you. You can also obviously use them this afternoon if you want, but they're packed and ready to take home. We also have some hats. If anybody wants a hat, we probably have 6 of those or 8 of those. And a lot of these kitchen towels. We just brought some stuff to share with all you. So please.
Bags, like in the spice area, when people grab their 2 to 3, you have beautiful bags that are a gift for people too, right?
Yeah, exactly. We have these nice gift bags. I'll also just, shameless plug. Spices make great gifts. The holidays are coming up. We have some awesome gift boxes for all the cooks in your life at a whole bunch of different price ranges and standard spices, esoteric, interesting spices, all kinds of fun stuff. Our site is killer. So please check us out. We have these pamphlets on the table and of course, quite a few more. Our website is burlapandbarrel.com, and there's a QR code. We have a ton of recipes, and we have an amazing customer service team. If you have any questions about anything, we get back to you right away. In addition to supplying Dogfish Head, we are also happy to help all of you solve your holiday gift challenges. And in the meantime, we're going to send you home with some fun stuff. So Jake and I will see you over in the brew house, and happy to answer any specific questions about the products and where they come from and how to use them there as well.
So thank you to Burlap Barrel. It's thousands of dollars of shit that they're going to be giving to you guys to take on your journeys. I was going to give you a gift that was a Dogfish logoed balloon, because I thought it'd be really fun if you took the spices and put them in a balloon and then shoved them inside your body to smuggle them home in your intestines in an airplane. But our HR department said it'd be better if we gave you each a sweatshirt. So while the group that's up here is talking about recipes, I think Mark and Brian will also let you guys see our Spice Bazaar, our ongoing cold room at Dogfish, and right outside of it is where those sweatshirts are, because it is a cold room. So everyone's going to get a chance to go through our cold room that smells like a frozen Spice Bazaar 365 days of the week. So we're looking forward to the next phase of our time together.
That's it, the last of our Brewers Retreat episodes, recorded live at the Brewers Retreat in October at Dogfish Head. Big thanks to their wonderful hosts at Dogfish Head, all the featured brewers who collaborated on the experience with us, all the event sponsors who helped make it happen, and everyone who traveled from wide and far to be a part of it. We've started planning for 2025, and I've got some meetings later this month. Cannot wait to share more news about it as soon as I have it. Choose G&D chillers on your next expansion or brewery. Start up and receive 1 free year of remote control and monitoring. ProBrew offers 2 to 4 week lead time on in-stock rotary can fillers and seamers. Old Orchard is the go-to source for fruit-forward ingredients for some of the biggest names in the craft brewing landscape. Omega Yeast Daybreak 5 gives you juicy modern hop flavors without the haze. 5-Star Chemicals cleaning solutions are specifically formulated to meet the unique needs of breweries. Take back control of your canning and seaming with the experts at RSS Macklin. Trust Indie Hop's unique varieties to modernize, brighten, and diversify your beer lineup. And Berkeley yeast strains are designed to improve flavor, quality, and consistency. If you've enjoyed the podcast, go to beerandbrewing.com. Click on that subscribe button. You are a subscriber, right? If you're not, click that button right now. We depend on you. We are a small, independently owned business, and we really can't do this without you. We depend on you. As this airs, I'm in Poland for the Craft Roku competition and Polish Craft Brewer Symposium, and I can't wait to share some Polish craft perspectives with you all on future episodes. But next week, we actually head to Ohio for an episode from a small farm brewery. Until next week, cheers. This podcast has been brought to you by Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine, for those who love to make and drink great beer. To learn more or to subscribe, visit beerandbrewing.com or find us on social media at Craft Beer Brew.